So the next video that I want to talk about is stereo overhead choices. And if I'm trying, to make an older sounding record, this is going to be where I would start as far as my choices go. But I'm going to really delve into some more modern concepts here as well, because when it comes to stereo overhead miking, this is, really what it is. The 67 was the big Neumann microphone that was out when stereo miking really became a big thing in the 70s. Stereo had been around for decades by that point, but, during the 60s, people were listening to mono records, consuming mono records, so people were still recording in mono a lot. But in the 70s, stereo took off, and this microphone was used a ton for stereo recording, as was this microphone. This microphone is a 254, but the KM54, as well as its younger brother, the 84, was used a lot. I actually don't have a stereo pair of 84s anymore after a tragic accident, but I do have some 184s. We do have an 85 and we do have an 84 here, but we don't use them for stereo recording typically. We also have a pair of 87s, which was used a lot during that time period, but I do not typically use them for stereo recording of the drums. I do use them for piano a lot for stereo recording, though. The C12 was also used for stereo recording a lot, as was the C414. They're bright microphones, and they work really, really well up there. But during that time period, everybody was miniaturizing their microphones, and AKG came up with this microphone, which is the C451. And I absolutely love this as a stereo overhead microphone. It is one of my number one choices. It is in the top two between these two guys usually, and usually wins. And I actually pulled this down from the stereo drum set that we had in the live room to be able to make this video. Right after that, they came up with this microphone, which is the 460, and this microphone is actually a lot darker sounding than the 451. And there's some people who really loved this microphone. Bob Clearmountain used this microphone as a stereo overhead, and I'm pretty sure that, Bob Rock talks about how he would go and check out what Bob Clearmountain was doing for picking up new drum sounds, and Bob Rock also was known to use this microphone. The interesting choice is that they both seem to love Pultecs on this microphone. I don't know if that is the truth, but I can say that using this microphone and adding a bunch of top end from a Pultec is really, really nice. So take that for what it is. It does get used a lot in my work, but I will say that I rely on the 451 more. The 160, the M160, does get used as a stereo overhead a lot, but not typically as just stereo overheads here. So if I was trying to do some Led Zeppelin stuff, maybe I would rely on just a pair of these guys. But where I tend to use them is spot microphones for hi-hat and ride microphones. Typically, the hi-hat will give a very distinct voice to the record, and I'll try and capture it in the overhead, but you can have a spot hi-hat microphone for places where you really, really need it, and it can come in really, really handy. And I'll tend to rely on this guy or the SM7 for that, task. But this one and using it on ride, I actually learned from reading about Jerry Finn. Supposedly he liked using these microphones there, and I picked it up and I've been using it there, and I can say that on ride especially, it sounds great. And being able to point the null pattern, since it is a ribbon microphone and it's in figure of 8, it comes out really, really useful. The 184, I will say, is not one of my favorite drum overhead microphones. I feel like there's better uses for this microphone in the studio. A lot of people give it hate when comparing it to the 84. I will say that it does sound different to an 84, and it is not as good in the application of drum miking. I would rather have, 84s or 85s, or even something like the 100s with the 40 capsules would be better up there than this microphone. But this microphone is great, and we have used it on stereo overheads when need be. I will say that it's awesome on toms, and it can be very useful on certain electric guitar sounds. These microphones over here definitely deserve some honorable mention. This is the 137, and I've relied on this as a stereo drum overhead for a long time. You know, we are blessed and we have pairs of all of these microphones, but sometimes we need to utilize these microphones for recording other things when we've got people in the studio. If we've got a lot of things going on, we may have to, we really like recording the vibes with these. So if we're recording stereo drums, these may have to go up on the vibes, so these may get relied on, but we may want to use those somewhere else. Like someone's playing some acoustic guitars, we really like those on acoustic guitars. We also like these, but we really like those on piano. This microphone is an absolute workhorse, and it can be used on in any of those situations, and the same can be said for this one. So this is the Shure 137, and this is a Crown CM700, and they're both relatively inexpensive microphones that are indispensable to anybody's toolkit. So if you're looking for anything to do one of these purposes, whether it's toms, overheads, the piano, acoustic guitars, some places where small diaphragm condensers or brighter microphones or microphones that are very, very detailed will come in handy, then I suggest checking these guys out because they're awesome. And I cannot speak more highly of using a 57 on, or I mean a 57 on a drum set. Using it for an overhead like Death Cab for Cutie in Narrow Stairs and I Will Possess Your Heart is a perfect example. It has this very mid-range forward woody boxy sound, which you can also hear clearly on Sarah Smile, that just cuts through. And if you want anything to sound more like the 60s or more like a Beat Break or something like that, this is just a great sound to throw up for a stereo overhead.